The ship docked, its landing struts creaking under the weight of reinforced combat plating. I hadn't been briefed on what exactly made this world forbidden, just that the Blackwell Protocol had been invoked, and I had one job: eliminate any trace of the colony. My orders were clear, brutal but clear. I'd carried out similar missions before. The HUD in my helmet ran a scan over the perimeter, projecting a clean readout. No signs of life, no energy readings. Just me, my ship, and the silent remnants of a place that should have been buzzing with activity. I'd been trained to expect anything out here, but this level of emptiness, that wasn't on the list. I stepped out, the suit's exoskeleton humming quietly with each movement. Everything here had a muted look, like the color had been drained out. The buildings stood in silence, skeletal frames that had once been sleek and modern. Walls were corroded, the metal peeling away in strips as if the planet had decided to chew them up and spit them out. My HUD ran another scan, this time focusing on the decay. Nothing. No clues. Just readings that didn't make sense. I made my way to the colony's main square. There should have been something here. Evidence of life. Abandoned workstations, scattered personal belongings, signs of a hasty retreat. But the emptiness was worse than that. It was as if everyone had simply stopped existing. Tables were set as though for a meal, with plates, cups, and utensils perfectly arranged but untouched by dust or time. No footprints, no sign of struggle. Just silent, preserved emptiness. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a cracked glass pane, fractured into pieces but still recognizable. It reminded me of a neural net imprint, a glimpse into a mind that wasn't quite right, scattered across fragments, distorted. My HUD suddenly signaled an incoming neural imprint. I hadn't expected to find one out here. The implant hummed, syncing with the data embedded in the colony's network. Settlers' memories, impressions, little glimpses into their lives before. Whatever this was. The protocol authorized me to access these fragments if it could help complete the mission. The first memory hit, raw and immediate. I felt the sharp edge of fear, visceral and unfiltered, as if I'd lived it myself. I was seeing through someone's eyes. A man, clutching a child in his arms, whispering something I couldn't make out. They were hiding, and he looked over his shoulder at something beyond my line of sight. His face twisted in a rictus of terror. He was shaking, eyes darting as if striving to maintain his sanity in the face of something inexplicable. In an instant, the imprint ended. I blinked, the aftershock lingering, nerves raw as I stumbled back into my own skin. Whatever he'd seen, whatever had caused that look, it stayed with me, clawing at the back of my mind. I tried to shake it off. The Blackwell Protocol meant nothing clean, nothing easy. A quiet buzz sounded in my helmet, a malfunction in my HUD. My vision blinked, static flickering across my display, making my surroundings feel even more unreal. I reached up to tap my helmet, muttering a curse as the interference settled. Just a minor glitch. Probably the planet's atmosphere. I continued through the colony, stepping over scraps of corroded metal and shattered glass. The decay here was unnatural, as if something was erasing human presence one piece at a time. A once advanced piece of mining equipment lay in the center of the square, gutted beyond recognition. It wasn't like the usual wear and tear. It looked like it had aged decades in a matter of days, its circuitry fused and dead, its metal casing pitted and flaking. I ran another scan, focusing on the equipment. My HUD returned results that made no sense, the data garbled and unreadable. It was like the planet was rejecting any attempt to understand it, repelling analysis like a body rejecting a foreign object. I shut the scanner off, frustrated. Then came another signal from my neural net, a stronger one this time, another imprint. It was sudden, jarring. I was back in someone else's head, this time a woman. She was in the colony's main corridor, panting and running. She wasn't alone. There were others with her, their faces blank and desperate. The walls around them shook, not from an explosion but from something deeper, like the planet was convulsing. The corridor lights went dark, then light again, irregular, disorienting. Her fear was sharper than the first memory, closer to the bone. She turned to look back, and for an instant I saw something at the edge of her vision, a shadow that seemed to stretch, reaching for them. And then, darkness. The memory ended. I inhaled sharply, reeling as if I'd been punched in the gut. I steadied myself, forcing down the nausea. The Blackwell Protocol had never felt like this. I was here to execute an order, not piece together some horror story left behind by the damned. Whatever the settlers had seen, whatever had made them leave these imprints, I had the sinking feeling it hadn't left the planet. I was in its territory now. Pushing forward, I came upon the colony's operations hub. The door was half open, hanging askew on its hinges. Inside, consoles blinked erratically, casting faint, dying glows. It was a mess, tables overturned, chairs scattered, as if whoever had been here left in a hurry or never left at all. My HUD tried to connect to the operations hub's network, pulling up old logs. But instead of data, I found more fragments, embedded memories that surged through my neural net without warning. Faces distorted in fear, screams caught in silent echoes, flashes of corridors stretching and distorting like an optical illusion. Each imprint brought with it another jolt of fear, each one feeling like a kick to the ribs. I leaned against a wall, my breath coming fast. They weren't just memories. They were more than that, seared impressions of terror, embedded like messages, warnings. The settlers hadn't left by choice. Something had driven them mad, scared them so deeply they'd left these memories behind, imprinted in the very metal of the colony. I couldn't explain it, but it was as if the planet had consumed them, leaving behind only this twisted legacy. I pushed myself upright, trying to summon the cold detachment I'd been trained to maintain. I was a soldier, a tool for enforcing the protocol. Emotions had no place here. But as I looked at the empty consoles, the scarred walls, I knew that staying detached was a fool's game. This place was beyond anything I'd prepared for. I moved through the half-light of the colony corridors, haunted by the silence that refused to let me go. My neural net was quieter, but I could still feel the remnants of those memories. The ghosts of terror left by the settlers, clinging to the edges of my mind. Whatever had happened here, whatever had left those imprints, it wasn't gone. It was watching. The deeper I went, the worse the decay became. The walls of the colony warped, the surfaces lined with patches of corrosion that no environment should cause. A layer of something slick covered every surface, like a thin film that clung to my gloves and boots as I moved. It was as if the colony had become part of the planet's ecosystem, gradually absorbed, digested, like a body breaking down from the inside. The thought was unsettling, but it was all too real in front of me. My HUD flickered again, struggling to maintain a stable feed as I accessed the colony's logs, desperately seeking answers. The data was corrupt, but I could still catch fragments, technical logs detailing inexplicable malfunctions, entries reporting strange behavior among the settlers, moments of panic and doubt. The final few entries were all the same, desperate pleas, each log shorter and more fragmented than the last, until they devolved into incoherent ramblings. I pushed on, each corridor becoming more distorted, as if the planet was trying to twist and reshape the colony to its liking. My breaths came faster, despite the oxygen regulator's attempts to calm me. My HUD signaled another neural imprint. I braced myself, knowing it would be like the others. But this one, it was stronger, more forceful, latching onto my mind like a parasite. It hit me hard, a memory from someone farther along in their descent into madness. I was looking through the eyes of a woman, wide and bloodshot, standing alone in a corridor. She held a weapon, trembling hands gripping it tight, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Her breathing was erratic, uneven. The lights around her flickered in irregular, jerky rhythms, casting distorted shadows. She turned to look behind her, catching sight of a man farther down the hall, leaning against the wall. He was muttering to himself, scratching at his skin until blood dotted his fingertips. His eyes looked empty, like he wasn't seeing anything in front of him, only the nightmare playing behind his eyelids. His body began to change, his face twisted, his jaw slackening, as if something inside him was desperate to escape. The woman backed away, her own voice breaking into a frantic whisper. The memory shattered, dropping me back into my own body, my heart pounding like a war drum. I clutched my head, trying to shake off the images, but they lingered, like acid in my brain. I was no stranger to horror, but this wasn't something I could rationalize. I couldn't explain what I'd just seen. I looked at my hands, half expecting to see them warping, stretching as they had in the memory. They were steady, but a chill ran through me anyway. Whatever had infected these people, whatever had twisted them, I was walking in their footsteps. I continued forward, half stumbling through the darkened corridors, the silence broken only by the hum of my exosuit. I tried to focus, to push the memory aside, but the feeling of being watched was stronger now. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was something I could feel, like a presence pressing in on all sides. Another signal from the neural net. I swore under my breath, bracing for what was coming. This time the imprint was chaotic, fragmented. Flashes of the settlers moving in panicked groups, clutching each other, faces pale and gaunt, eyes darting as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. Someone screamed, a high, keening sound that echoed in my skull, the sound of a person pushed past the brink. I could feel the walls closing in on them, like the colony itself was alive, trapping them, bending to some unseen will. I stumbled, disoriented, and had to lean against a wall to steady myself. The imprint's intensity was getting worse, invading my mind, searing itself into my thoughts. Each memory felt like it was trying to break me down. My HUD blurred, lines of static running across my display, making everything look warped, twisted. It wasn't until I tried to check my surroundings that I realized the HUD wasn't glitching. The walls around me were shifting, undulating as if they were breathing, contracting and expanding with a grotesque rhythm. I reached out, my gloved hand brushing against the wall, and felt it pulsing under my touch, soft and yielding, like flesh instead of metal. I jerked my hand back, horror filling my chest. The colony was transforming, merging with the planet in some nightmarish way. This was no ordinary degradation. The planet was rejecting the colony, repurposing it, turning it into something else. I forced myself to keep moving, to push past the horror building in my chest. But each step felt like I was walking deeper into a trap. My neural net throbbed again, dragging me into another imprint before I could even brace myself. This time, I saw the colony's leader. He stood in the main control room, surrounded by others, his face marked with lines of desperation and exhaustion. He was speaking to the group, his voice low, strained, explaining something I couldn't quite hear. The others listened, faces blank, empty, as if hope had already died within them. The room filled with a rumbling sound, almost like a heartbeat vibrating through the walls. The settlers looked around, eyes widening as the sound intensified, pressing against their skulls. One by one they began to tremble, their bodies convulsing, hands clawing at their own skin, as if something was trying to tear its way out from within. The imprint ended, and I staggered back, slamming my shoulder against the wall. I was drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I could still feel that rumbling in my bones, that invasive beat that felt like it was trying to worm its way into my mind. Whatever had infected the settlers, it was still here, and it was alive. My HUD beeped, a warning. I glanced down, my stomach twisting as I saw the words, "Biological anomaly detected." My body was beginning to feel heavy, like there was something foreign inside me. I looked down at my hand and saw the faintest hint of discoloration, a dark patch creeping along my wrist, as if something was spreading under my skin. I closed my eyes, taking a long, shuddering breath. This wasn't what I signed up for. The Blackwell Protocol was supposed to be cut and dry. Go in, eliminate all traces, leave. I was a soldier, not an investigator, not some fool meant to poke around a cursed world. But now, I couldn't leave. The planet had me, and I was starting to understand just how deeply. As I staggered down another corridor, desperate for a way out, I saw something ahead. Another corpse. The body was twisted, warped in surreal angles, with limbs that seemed to blend into the walls themselves, half absorbed into the metal. It was as if the planet had started to devour him, leaving only this monstrous fusion of flesh and metal. I stumbled through the darkened corridors, one agonizing step at a time. The colony's walls shifted around me, the surfaces rippling as if they had a pulse. It felt like the planet was slowly absorbing the metal, fusing it with its own organic, unearthly life. I couldn't deny it any longer. I was inside something alive, something that wanted me. My HUD continued to flicker, and even basic data feeds were scrambled, refusing to relay anything comprehensible. But it didn't matter. Every scan, every reading had told me the same thing. I was alone, caught in the clutches of a world that didn't welcome intruders. Another neural imprint traveled into my mind, even before I'd registered the signal. This one was raw, almost violent, yanking me from my body and throwing me into someone else's last moments. The world around me changed as I took on the memory. I was looking through the eyes of a man standing in what looked like the colony's command center, surrounded by a few others. They were watching a hologram, a glowing alien script twisting in the air before them. One of them, a woman with hollow eyes and a haunted expression, spoke in a trembling voice. "It's a signal," she whispered. "We thought it was a message, but it's something else. It's calling to us." The leader, the man whose memory I was reliving, clenched his fists. I could feel his rising terror, the dreadful realization that he'd led them into a trap. "We were wrong," he murmured. "We should never have come here." And then the walls around them trembled. A deep, rumbling sound pulsed through the room, vibrating from the floor up, resonating through their bones. They clutched their heads, eyes wide, as the sound became louder, more invasive, like it was burrowing into their skulls. I could feel their pain, their helplessness, as the sound seemed to spread inside them, like a parasite digging through their minds. Then the imprint ended, dropping me back into my own body with a jolt. My ears still rang with that low, pulsing noise, even though I knew it wasn't real. It was as if the memory had left something behind, a residual echo that refused to leave. I staggered, clutching my helmet, breathing hard as I tried to regain control. My head throbbed, and I could feel something shifting in my mind, as though the planet was trying to root itself inside me, twist me like it had twisted the settlers. The command center wasn't far now. I pushed on, my steps becoming heavier, as if something invisible weighed me down. The walls continued to ripple, their texture shifting from metal to something softer, something that felt disturbingly organic. I reached the command center, the door half open and warped, barely clinging to its frame. I stepped inside, feeling the tension in my muscles, the ache in my bones. The hologram that I'd seen in the memory, the alien script, was still there, floating above the main console. Its symbols twisted in patterns that I couldn't decipher. My HUD struggled to interpret it, the text blurring as my neural implant attempted to understand the meaning. A voice echoed in my helmet, layered with static, delivering a garbled message. It was a recording left by the colony leader, the same man from my memory. "If you're hearing this, you're already trapped. We thought it was a message, a signal from intelligent life, but it's something else. It's a part of this planet. It doesn't want us. It consumes us, digests us until we're part of it." The message ended in a crackle of static, leaving me standing there, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't an abandoned colony or some unexplained desertion. This planet was a trap, set by a force we couldn't understand. They'd been lured here, thinking they could survive, maybe even thrive. But this place had its own rules, and those who dared to ignore them were devoured. A pulse of energy washed over the room, and I felt something shift around me. The hologram twisted, morphing into a new shape, one that resembled the planet itself. I watched in horror as the shape warped, showing a dark core, a massive entity beneath the surface, pulsing like a heartbeat. My HUD blared a warning. Biological contamination detected. The dark patch on my wrist had spread, and I could feel it under my skin, creeping up my arm, a cold numbness spreading as if the planet was claiming me. My breath hitched, panic clawing its way up my throat as I realized that whatever had infected the settlers had already taken root in me. I backed away, desperate to escape, but the door had sealed itself shut. I was trapped. In that moment, I understood. This planet was consuming us, integrating us into its ecosystem. The settlers hadn't gone mad. They'd become part of this place, twisted, mutated, absorbed into something beyond human understanding. I backed away from the console, but the rumbling became louder, shaking the room. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, as if the colony had become an organ of the planet itself. The infection spread faster now, tingling up my arm, a foreign presence burrowing into my flesh, merging with my nerves. I tried to shut down the neural implant, to sever the connection, but it was too late. The planet had already breached my defenses, and I could feel its influence spreading through me. A dark, ancient consciousness pressing into my mind. It wasn't just a planet, it was a collector, a sentient entity that harvested life, integrating anything it encountered into its body, its purpose. I fell to my knees, the realization crushing me. I wasn't here to destroy a colony, I was here to become part of it. A final pulse from the neural net forced one last imprint into my mind. I was back in the eyes of the colony leader, alone in this very room, recording his last words. He looked straight ahead, empty, defeated. This place, it doesn't need us. It uses us. We're fuel. He stared at his hands, which had begun to warp, the skin darkening, melding with the console. The imprint ended and I found myself back in my own body, shivering, feeling the same transformation creeping through me. My hands had begun to change, skin darkening, fingers twisting, reshaping as the infection spread. I watched in horrified fascination as the planet claimed me, cell by cell, a grotesque transformation that left no doubt in my mind. I was no longer human. The planet wasn't just infecting me, it was claiming me. A primal fear took over. I tried to reach for the controls on my suit, desperate to trigger an emergency response, to send a distress signal, anything to break free. But my hands wouldn't obey. My fingers were useless, reshaped into unrecognizable forms. Even if I could still operate the controls, I knew it was already too late. This planet had chosen me, just as it had chosen those before me. The rumbling heartbeat pulsed again, vibrating through the walls, resonating in my chest. I felt my own heartbeat sync with it, my body aligning itself with this planet's rhythm, joining its alien pulse. Each beat stripped away more of me, layer by layer, taking not just my physical form, but something deeper. I could feel memories slipping, fragments of who I was dissolving like mist in the sun. I stumbled, falling to my knees as the pulsing intensified, filling my mind with a chorus of voices. At first, they were faint, distant murmurs. But as I listened, they sharpened, converging into words, thoughts, memories. I saw faces, felt emotions that weren't my own, each one flashing past in an overwhelming tide. There were thousands of voices, overlapping, merging, each one a fragment of someone who had been here before. In that instant, I understood. This planet was a vast, ancient mind that had absorbed every person who had ever set foot on its surface. Every memory, every thought, every whisper of consciousness was gathered here, woven into the fabric of the planet's core. Each settler, each enforcer, each unknowing soul who had come to this place had been consumed, their identities stripped and filed away, all part of a collective knowledge far older than humanity. My own memories began to slip faster now, sucked into the planet's endless archives. I tried to cling to them, tried to remember who I was, where I had come from, but they drifted further. slipping through my fingers like sand. I remembered flashes, faces, names, places, but even those began to fade, replaced by thoughts and experiences that weren't mine. In one vivid moment, I saw a woman's face, eyes wide and terrified, staring up at something unseen. Her fear was sharp, raw, and I knew it was her last moment alive. Then her face was gone, replaced by a new memory, someone else's memory, of a distant world, green fields under an alien sun. Then another, a child's laugh echoing in a vast, empty hall. I wasn't just seeing them. I was feeling them, each memory becoming part of me, each life joining my own. But I could feel myself slipping away with every memory I absorbed. I was merging, my consciousness spreading thin, diluted by the sheer weight of the voices pressing into me. I was becoming part of the planet, part of its vast and endless mind, an archive of thoughts and memories that would go on long after my own name had been forgotten. I drifted through the memories. I could no longer tell where I ended and the planet began. Each thought was a fragment of someone else's life, each emotion a relic of a person who had once been whole. I wanted to scream, to claw my way back to the surface, to reclaim something of myself. But even that impulse faded, swallowed by the tide. I understood now, in a way I hadn't before, that I wasn't the first to feel this terror. Every soul here had felt the same fear, the same despair as they realized they were becoming part of something greater, something they could never escape. Yet, in a way, that realization brought a grim kind of peace. This was the fate of every person who touched this world. No one could resist it, no one could fight it. The planet was vast, ancient, patient. It waited, absorbing, gathering, a collector of life and knowledge that stretched back to the beginning of time. I was just another addition, another piece of the puzzle, one more voice in an endless sea. I would exist forever, but only as one small, powerless fragment of a vast and incomprehensible mind. In those final moments of clarity, I felt my last thoughts slipping away, my last traces of self fading into the collective. My life, my memories, my fears, all of it was dissolving, leaving behind only a faint echo of who I had been. I could feel the last of my humanity draining, my identity fracturing and merging into the whole. The planet's pulse beat one final time, and I felt it resonate through me, a deep, reverberating note that carried with it the weight of ages. I was part of it now, a permanent resident in the vast consciousness of a world that knew no end. In a final, quiet thought, I understood the truth. My journey, my mission, none of it had ever mattered. I was here to be absorbed, to be consumed, to join the countless others who had come before me. My existence would live on, but only as one faint thread woven into the fabric of an eternal alien mind. With that final understanding, I let go, surrendering to the planet's embrace, my last thought fading into the collective silence, carrying on forever in the depths of an ancient, endless mind.